Cyrus, what's your story, man?
Okay. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 22. So I was basically like finishing my senior year of college. I was at Stanford University and I was just like trying to move on with my life and just kind of do something different other than college.
Stanford, is that a good school?
No, it's like community college. You
Okay.
might have heard of it. Yeah, it's in Alabama. Yeah.
All right.
So so basically I'm 22 years old and I just noticed that like I had never been that thirsty before. Like I'm a thirsty dude and I like to drink water and like I'm an athlete and whatever, like drinking water is just part of the game.
And this is before people said like you're thirsty. This is a different thirsty.
This is a different thirsty.
You had no idea what to expect during this podcast. I swear I'm not drunk. I didn't do any drugs, but like let's lighten some shit up here. All right. So you're
totally. All right. So here I am like trying to study for finals and I was like, man, drink a glass of water. And then I was like literally 3 seconds later, I was like, okay, I'm thirstier. And then I would drink more. And then I was like, okay, I'm thirstier. So I picked up the phone and called my sister and I was like, could you explain to me what's happening right now? Because I'm drinking about a gallon of water per day. I feel really low energy and I'm urinating literally every 30 minutes, like clockwork throughout the day. And then when I would go to sleep, I would cramp up. So you know that feeling when you're like sleeping and all of a sudden your calf cramps and you wake up and you're just like, oh God, it's like incredibly intense pain, right? So I would try and relax.
That's when I tell my wife to get off my leg. Like, come on, this is not comfortable.
Yeah, totally. And what would end up happening was that I had like a severe cramp in my right leg. And then I would try and relax the tension there. And then it would cause a cramp in my left hamstring, which would then cause a cramp in my right butt cheek. And then all of a sudden my shoulder cramped and my abdomen cramped. And I kid you not, there were a couple of nights where I was just lying in bed in what felt like full body rigor mortis. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I don't understand what's causing this. This is too much. So when I called my sister, I was like, hey, what's going on? She's a doctor of osteopathy. She's an MD. Or I'm sorry, a DO. And she was basically like, hey, you have type 1 diabetes, go straight to the health clinic right now. So I show up at the health clinic 30 minutes later. They test my blood glucose. The nurse takes a look at me. She goes, how did you get here? And I was like, I think I walked, but I'm not 100% certain. And she's like, we have to get you to the ER right now. And I was like, could somebody please explain to me what the heck is going on? Right. And she's like, your blood glucose is in the 600s. It's 6 times higher than it's supposed to be. You're in a condition called DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. Wow. This is a life-threatening condition. We got to get insulin into you right now. We got to go to the hospital. So they took me to the hospital. I show up at the hospital 24 hours later. I was in the hospital for 24 hours. Sure. In the hospital, they're like, oh, hey, Cyrus, by the way, yes, you have type 1 diabetes. They start giving me insulin in one arm, saline in the other arm to rehydrate me, to actually get some fluid back into me. And they're like, by the way, you also have 2 other autoimmune conditions. And I was like, awesome. Greatest news I've heard in a long time. What are they? And they're like, in addition to type 1 diabetes, you also have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. And you have a thing called alopecia universalis. And I was like, these are big words. What is this? And they were like, the reason why you are losing your hair, because it was falling out at that time, is because you have an autoimmune condition called alopecia, which is going to make you completely bald. And I was like, awesome. What else? Right. And they were like, we've literally never seen anybody with this combination of autoimmune diseases before. This is the first time we've ever seen it. Can we talk about you?
Was there like 20 doctors around? Be like, you got to go see this dude. Like,
yeah, literally. They were like, can we talk about you at our next team huddle? And I was like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And then they left the room and I was like, not feeling confident right now. This is a little awkward. Right. So over the course of 24 hours, they explain this to me. They give me, I get discharged at the end of 24 hours. Right. I have 2 types of insulin, a basal insulin, a bolus insulin. I have a prescription for syringes, for test strips, for a blood glucose meter, a carbohydrate counting guide. And they basically were like, good luck. And I was like, you have got to be fucking kidding me. I don't understand what is happening here. Right. So long story short, I basically did a low carbohydrate diet because that's what the sort of like general medical world was telling you at that time. Right. And they're still telling people the same thing now. So I was like, all right, I can do meat, cheese, chicken, fish, oil, peanut butter, turkey burgers. Fine. I'm totally into it. Let's do it. So I started eating a lot of those foods. The promise was that my glucose was supposed to become more controllable and my insulin use would go down. Well, guess what happened? My insulin use went up and my blood glucose became more uncontrollable. So I was like, listen, I think I'm following directions. I'm trying to do this as diligently as possible. But in addition to having very strange blood glucose, my muscles started to hurt. And I was like, oh, hell no. I'm an athlete. Like, I love playing soccer. I love going to the gym. I love lifting weights. Like, you cannot take that stuff away from me, period, end of story. So when I started to feel the physical pain of it, I was like, I got to change everything right here and right now. So as a result of that, I switched over to eating a plant-based diet. I wasn't looking for it. I just stumbled across it. Some guy talked to some guy who talked to some guy who put me in contact with some dude named Doug Graham, who happened to be very knowledgeable about teaching people how to eat a plant-based diet. And I went to his sports camp. So I show up at a sports camp, and over the course of 7 days, he transitions me to a fully plant-based diet where I am, without question, eating piles, I kid you not, piles of bananas and mangoes. And I was like, I think I like this. Very tasty. And what I expected was that my blood glucose would go through the roof, because that's what the traditional diabetes world tells you, right? You eat more carbohydrate, good luck. Your glucose is going to go way up and your insulin use is going to go way up. So I was fully expecting that. But what happened was that I would eat a bunch of this fruit and my blood glucose came down very quickly, like so quickly that I had to start backing off on the amount of insulin I gave myself. So I went from like 45 units a day to 40 to 37 to 36 to 31 to 27. And before I knew it, after a week, I was at like 25 units of insulin. So just like Robbie was saying, I wasn't playing the carbohydrate avoidance game to lower my insulin use. I was playing the eat as much carbohydrate as you possibly can game. And my insulin use was going down. So I was like, this is fascinating. So I put myself back to graduate school a couple of years later, and I was like, I want to go study this stuff. Yeah. So I went to UC Berkeley. I studied there for 5 years to get a PhD.
Is that a good school too?
Yeah, it's also in Alabama. So it's a little bit closer.
No offense to anybody in Alabama.
And while I was there, I was given the task of learning the ins and outs of diabetes. Like, what causes insulin resistance was like the main question I was trying to answer. Yeah. So I would, using laboratory mice and rats, we basically induced insulin resistance in them and then tried to rescue their insulin sensitivity using either calorie restriction or intermittent fasting or some type of movement. And we learned a ridiculous amount of stuff about, how to create and how to reverse insulin resistance. And while I was at grad school for 5 years, I also learned that what I had experienced in my body, which was an increased ability to consume a ridiculous amount of carbohydrate for less insulin, was something that had already been described in the medical literature since literally 1920. So we're talking 100 years of scientific evidence that clearly describes the isolated biological phenomenon, and then experiments that are happening inside of small groups of people, inside of larger groups of people, inside of people who are living with hypertension and diabetes, people who are overweight, people who don't calorie restrict, you name it. And the story that had been created over the past 100 years was brilliant. And I was like, wait a minute, you're telling me that the scientific world knows how to create and reverse insulin resistance using a predominantly plant-based diet, using a low-fat approach. But yet, what the public does is the exact opposite. The public eats a low-carbohydrate diet, a ketogenic diet, a paleo diet, thinking that that's the solution to diabetes. But yet the rate of diabetes, pre-diabetes and type 2 in this country is going up at like a parabolic rate. So something about this didn't make sense to me. Long story short, Robbie and I ended up meeting each other somewhere along the way. And we were like, hey, you want to go tell real people how they can switch over to their diet to, more plant-based foods and get ridiculous results? And, hence Mastering Diabetes was born. And, we've helped over the course of the last 5 years or so, we've helped, I don't even know how to quantify at this point, over 100,000 people